I've mentioned these facts to mathematicians or academicians, and they say, it's just an amazing coincidence. Like, really? You tell them phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. What does that mean? Because there's a difference, by the way, between mathematics and arithmetic. People incorrectly say, well, the Pythagoreans and Platonists and Aristotle were extremely adamant about their disciples understanding mathematics. No, they were interested in understanding about arithmetic. You could actually download a super ancient text. It's called the Theology of Arithmetic. It's written by Iamblichus. It's a really, really ancient text, and it could have been a Neo-Pythagorean text that far, far precedes Iamblichus. But you talk about proportionality, and what does this mean? Because I'm not interested in confusing anybody, because a lot of people say, are you using big words? I don't understand what you're saying. And I try to make things as simple as possible. There's only so simplex you can make something before you've dumbed it down to the point where it becomes meaningless. But in simple, it means that phi is 1 and 1 is phi. The perfect proportionality of these things are derivative manifestations of one and the same thing. No different than saying if I had a rubber stamp, which would represent 1, and if I actually stamped that X number of times, and it's like, well, now we actually have 1.618 of these stamps. Not that that would be easy with a stamp, but you get my point. But it is the one thing in manifestation of its attribute. In other words, the limiting factor of the 1 in manifestation in harmonic with that 1. Kind of like, fish swim and fish breathe water. The attribute of light is illumination. But the nature or attribute of the 1 in manifestation, and actually how and what it does, not that it does anything, but its extrinsic attribute, manifests itself as perfect proportionality of itself. Like human beings don't give birth to wombats and porcupines. They give birth to a fractional human being, which of course grows into a larger human being. In other words, that which the 1 produces is perfect harmonic resonance to itself is nothing other than a derivative of itself. So when I actually say phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi, what I'm actually saying is that all the derivatives, phi to the power of -3, 1 over phi, 1, literally 1, phi squared, phi cubed, on and on and on, are all just different modalities of manifestation and demanifestation between space and counter space, by the way. Counter space is kind of a ridiculous word, but there's only one conjugate geometry of the entire universe, which is two things, but it's not two things, it's one and the same thing. We think of ice and water as, of course, two different things, but ice, of course, is just a different modality of expression of water. It has different attributes. So the conjugate geometry of the universe, of course, is the hyperboloid and the torus. I love the fact that this is my discovery. No other person before myself. I'm not patting myself on the back right now. I know someone's going to accuse me of that. But it is my discovery, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm the first person in the world throughout all history that actually understands what magnetism is, and that the conjugate geometry of the universe is the hyperboloid and the torus, respectively, of course, the dielectric and magnetic. Each one is the negative image of the other. Magnetism, of course, is a dielectric field. I've had some people say, well, that's not your discovery. It's like, well, Walter Russell didn't say that ever. There's no other person, not Tesla or Steinmetz or Heaviside or James Clerk Maxwell, that said that. So it is my discovery. If I drop dead tomorrow for whatever reason, I will at least have, made a significant discovery. I've written quite a few books. As to the fundamental nature of things. Because, as I've said humorously, Mother Nature is like a hairy armpit chick with dreadlocks and muddy feet. She doesn't have a slide rule and she doesn't have a calculator. Everything is simplex pressure mediation. So the divine proportionality of the universe is, and this is a discovery that I found in Plato's Republic 509d to 511. It's called the divided line. I have a little piece of chalk. Where's my chalk at? Right here. I used to hate chalk because the dust would get everywhere, and the teacher would use a lot of chalk on the chalkboard that float around the classrooms. Like, I hated chalk. Now I use chalk all the time. Here's an old school board chalk. If you actually take a line Okay, and you divide it unevenly. I'll try to do this while looking at it. You take this line, you divide it unevenly. It's like, okay, here we go. We're going to divide it unevenly there. Yeah, that's uneven because you have a huge section over here, huge section right. And you take each one of those sections and you divide it unevenly. Yeah, what you end up is a proportionality of phi, 1, 1, and 1 over phi. Phi, of course, is 1.618. 1 is... By the way, these two together are the euristos dias, the tolma, i.e. the principle and attribute, i.e. light and illumination. Yeah, this is also to the central section. Here we actually have the cosmos noitos, i.e. counter space, and here we have the cosmos athitos over on this side. 1 over phi, of course, is 0.618. Together, collectively, these form phi cubed right here, which is 4.23606. I could literally make like a dozen different videos about the interesting qualities of phi cubed. However, the whole thing collectively, phi 1, 1, and 1 over phi to the power, 1 over phi, excuse me, which is this. It's 1 over phi to the power of negative 3. This is 0.23606. This is, 1 over phi to the power, and this is the euristos dias or the tolma. This is the incommensurability of the Pythagoreans. This is literally, not my position or my words, the one great secret, quote unquote, of the Pythagoreans. This is them saying that. And not me, them saying that. One great secret of the Pythagoreans is incommensurability. There's a reason why I have this triangle tattooed on the back side of my hand right here. This is the 108, 36, 36 triangle, which two sloping sides of 1 and 1 with a base of phi. Here we go. There it is right there. Right up here at the top is the euristos dias. This is the 1 and 1, the first two digits of the Fibonacci sequence, which collectively are one thing only. Yeah, there is no original sin or first cause in Pythagorean, Indian, Greek, or Egyptian monism. The idea of original sin or prima causa or first cause does not exist in Pythagoreanism or monism. Yeah, explaining that one's slightly difficult. However, it's divinely simplex. And of course, here we have the two isosceles top sections, which are 1 and 1. The incommensurable cut, interestingly enough, is 1 over phi, or 0.618. And right here, we actually see a mirror image of the entire triangle. Right there, that's also to the incommensurability. Right down here, of a base, if we have 1 and 1 here, we have phi down here, but phi is equal to 1. But phi is also equal to phi to the power of 3, or phi cubed. And that is also 2 equal to phi. So this base is both phi, phi cubed, and 1 over phi to the power of negative 3. So both phi to the power of negative 3, phi to the power of negative 2, which is 0.381, 1 over phi, which is 0.618, phi itself, which of course is 1, because phi is to 1, is 1 is to phi. That's not like a belief or a feeling, that's a mathematical absolute. But when you say that to a mathematician, since they're not interested in arithmetic, there's a big difference between arithmetic and mathematics. They say, yeah, well, so what's the significance of that? It's like, well, the entire universe has all its beauty and significance and meaning due to the fact that phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. This means that phi and 1 are both one and the same thing. This is the incommensurability of the extrinsic attribute of the absolute. Yeah? To express it another way, since I don't have an eraser here, I should have brought my eraser. I do have an eraser, but I didn't bring one. This means 1 and 1, which are the first two digits of the Fibonacci sequence, right? 1 and 1, principle and attribute, are also 1. That's the first subset, but that is the incommensurability, which is phi, which is also phi cubed, which is also, I actually don't have enough room on the chalkboard, phi to the power of negative 3, 1 over phi to the power of negative 3, which is 0.23606, and 1 divided by 0.23606, or phi to the power of negative 3, is phi cubed. But that contains the entirety of the incommensurability of the divided line section, which is ancient. People say, well, that's in Plato's Republic. Plato wrote that, maybe Socrates. Like, no. 509d to 511 in Plato's Republic is ancient. It's not my opinion, it's a fact. because the Timaeus, the Koine Greek of the Timaeus, the Parmenides, parts of Plato's Republic is very, very, very archaic and ancient. Just because you find it in Plato's Republic doesn't mean that Plato wrote it, and much less Socrates. You just take a line, yeah, you divide it unevenly, unevenly again, and you necessitatively end up with phi 1 and 1 over phi, which in totality is phi cubed. And this is the incommensurability of the absolute. This is how the Pythagoreans used retroduction to understand the nature of the characteristics and attributes of the absolute. This is not New Age stuff, because if you go to the metaphysics section of a bookstore, it's just a bunch of, New Age woo-woo, I call it. Woo-woo, like, stick a crystal on your head and burn sandalwood incense, and I call that woo-woo. That's, yeah. People don't understand that phi and 1 are exactly the same thing. I mean, even a child understands that water and ice is the same thing. I mean, even if they're like 5 years old, it's like, yeah, well, ice gets hot, turns into water. Ice is water. Well, phi and 1 are exactly the same thing. Phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. These are not two different things. Everything that is beautiful in the universe is due to the incommensurability of the extrinsic attribute of the absolute. Yes? It is the subdivision of the one by its own attribute that manifestation is able to occur. Space is the after effect of a divergent magnetic field, but space is the absence. Literally, space is the negative image of pure potential. When energy is released, there is a vacuity of true potential. Anything that actually is divergent creates an after effect or a shock wave. This is ether rarefaction. Space is ether torsion. Mother Nature always tries to erase space. Always does. That thing that human beings call magnetic attraction is not magnetic attraction at all. It is the natural order of the erasure of space. So such thing as magnetic attraction, because magnetism by definition is centrifugal force and motion. It is literally force itself. Mutual mass acceleration towards the null point. And magnets are never accelerating towards one another. Neither are gravitational masses accelerating towards one another, because that thing that we call gravity is electrostatic, is point non-source mutual mass acceleration. Magnetism is point source mutual mass acceleration, but never towards each other, but towards the lowest or null pressure point between the two. Everything in Mother Nature's universe is pressure mediation. But everything that is beautiful in the universe is nothing other than the multiplicative manifestation of the extrinsic attribute of the absolute. And I know that kind of sounds hard to wrap your brain around what I just said in that past sentence, but it is divinely simple. But unfortunately, we're bound by words. I can't communicate to you through telepathy, so I necessitatively, of course, must use words. But this is the proportionality of the divine likeness, which is the same, but in manifestation. Yeah. Energy's loss manifests the magnetic field. Well, magnetism is toroidal, and like a torus has a volume or an air in it, right? Difference between a hyperboloid, the null pressure point, in counter space, the center of a hyperboloid, like an hourglass shape, there's nothing there. There's no space there, there's no time there. It is zero loss. It is in counter space, but counter space, of course, is not a place. It has no Cartesian coordinate, but that loss of energy or inertia necessitates a three-dimensional force vector, and that three-dimensional force vector in extrapolation, of course, manifests space. But space has no properties. Quote, unquote, Nikola Tesla. This is the one and only time Nikola Tesla nearly foams at the mouth about anything against relativity and the idea of quantum, that space is something, like bending space. We're all brought up on this science fiction nonsense that you could bend and warp space, but that's completely ridiculous. Space is just the negative image of pure potential. Space is literally, what is the word I used before in another video? It's not a void, because a void is not a thing either. A void is void of something. Neither is a shadow anything. And space is exactly like a shadow. We all think a shadow is something, and a shadow is, of course, a noun in the dictionary, but a shadow is nothing other than an absence of light. Just as a shadow is nothing other than the absence of light, space is nothing other than the absence of pure potential of the ether. Space is nothing. A shadow is nothing. However, human beings reify concepts, but we were not taught important things in school or college because human beings have not intellectually evolved to the point of understanding these things that don't exist, like emptiness, space, chaos, waves. Waves don't exist either. A wave is not a thing. There's a list. I've made videos of the list of things that human beings think exist, but which of course don't actually exist at all. But understanding the beauty of nature by this retroductive analysis that the Pythagoreans used, by understanding that only, and this is the only perfect geometry in the entire universe, by the way, this 1, 1, phi triangle right here, which is also, too, the same geometry of, let's see if you could guess it before I draw it here, the same geometry of what? Before I draw it here. What's that the same geometry of? Do you remember? Yeah. The thing that is the interlocutor and the antenna for life to manifest, the water molecule. Yeah. Literally the antenna for the manifestation of consciousness. The consubstantiality, of course, between matter and spirit manifests through the necessitative matrix of water, which is the incommensurable and the only divine geometry in the entire universe as a molecule, water, because life without water is not possible. It's water. And you tell people that are such shallow thinkers, like, that's just a coincidence. Oh, sure. If I had the time and the ability to take the time off to do same, I could write a 1,000-page book on one thing only. I could even do more than 1,000 pages. All the different properties and characteristics of the divided line section and the only incommensurable geometry with perfect symmetrical perfection of what it is from every angle, period, which is this, the 1, 1, phi. And that's the reason why the pentagram is made up of that particular triangle, the 108, 36, 36, 1, 1, phi triangle. And it's incommensurable cut, and that is the incommensurability of the absolute manifestation. I hope this video didn't sound complicated in any way. I didn't mean it to be. I wanted to make it as simple as possible without dumbing it down to the point of absurdity, because you can take something and oversimplify it and just completely lose everything. And, you know, that's the skill involved. Like, how do you simplify it to the point where you don't lose everything? And that's difficult in all things, but this is what is meant as phi is to 1 as 1 is to phi. Phi and 1 are the exact same thing. So is phi cubed, phi to the power of -2, phi squared, 1 over phi. These are all one and the same thing. They're different manifestations of one thing by nature of its attribute. Like ice, water, and steam. They are all water. Phi, 1, 1 over phi, phi cubed, phi squared. Everything that is beautiful in the entire damn universe is phi, which is nothing other than explicit, by explicit I mean Cartesian, an explicit manifestation of the one due to its extrinsic attribute, which the Greeks called tolma, they called it ananke, and they also called it the euristos dias. And they said, in their own words, not mine, that this is the great secret of the Pythagoreans. That whole schmear being incommensurability and understanding what incommensurability is. Their words, not mine, the greatest secret of the Pythagoreans. If the Pythagoreans, with their great wisdom, said that that's their greatest secret, you would think people would say, geez, these people who we laud for their wisdom and intelligence and countless other things, said this is their greatest secret, then maybe we should investigate that. It might be slightly important. And brother, it is. And I can count on one hand how many people who have dived deeply, actually I can count like about that many fingers, dived deeply into trying to comprehend what the greatest secret of the Pythagoreans was. I can also say without gloating, even though if you think I'm gloating, that there's nobody alive on this earth that knows more about that topic than I do. That and $2 will get you a small cup of coffee, but wisdom is transcendent, and wisdom is its own reward. You know, people also don't understand that when you say it. It's like, what do you mean by that? It's like, really? I have to explain that? Anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hope you like this video. If you do, check the description up below. Any donation is welcome at all, or you can tell me how much you hated this video. And thanks so much. Have a wonderful... This is Easter weekend. Everybody's going to go do Easter things, whatever that is. Goodbye.